I just wanted to send out a warm welcome to all of you. It's so wonderful to see our square is little tonight. We have a lot of people joining us. I'm Beverly Tumala. If for those of you who don't know me, I'm a nurse with Christus VNA Hospice, and I'm also the vice president of the board of directors here at ABODE, and I chair the education committee. We're thrilled to have all of you here. We have people from Texas to California, Nebraska to Michigan, and all the way up to Canada. There's Candy, who are here with us tonight. So we're so thrilled that ABODE can reach across the country and share our word, share our love of the message that dying doesn't have to be scary, and open the conversation up. So tonight, we're going to talk about death and dying, looking at the religious customs and rituals. It's a topic that definitely struck a chord with all of us. I've been wanting to do this for a couple years now, since we started ABODE Academy. And so we finally got our program put together, and I think you're going to love it. I think you're going to love it. So before we get started, as you all know, it's ABODE's custom to begin with a contemplative moment. And it's a time when we can just center ourselves with this time that we have together. So I'm going to share a reading that Rabbi Stahl gave to us. It's written by Rabbi Alvin Fine. So I want you to kind of get into a moment, just where you are, center yourself, and be present as I read the following poem. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age. From innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing. From foolishness to destruction, and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness and back, we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love. From joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding. From fear to faith. From defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. Okay, so we're going to make sure if Mary hasn't muted you, I'm going to have you mute right now so we don't hear barking dogs and the pizza guy ring the doorbell. And while you're doing that, I'll just kind of give our pitch about ABODE. As you know, ABODE is the only home in San Antonio that cares for those people that are in the last 3 months, 3 days, or 3 weeks of life. And we do this at absolutely no charge. ABODE runs completely on donations and grants. When hospice sees their patients, this is how they come to ABODE. We see patients that are being cared for in sometimes squalor. Sometimes they live where no one can take care of them. Maybe no children or family nearby, and they've been given a devastating diagnosis, and now they can't take care of themselves. And so we call ABODE and pray there's a bed, and then our patients go there, and we love them out of this world. And we call them guests at ABODE, and we offer safe, loving, and contemplative care 24/7 until they take their last breath. It's a level of care we know that changes people's lives at the very end of their lives. And with that, I've realized that we have a huge educational opportunity. And again, like I said, I want ABODE to be a source of education for dying, and help them understand that dying doesn't have to be scary, and open those conversations up so we're all ready when the day comes. So our education programs are a key component of what we do, and we're happy to collaborate tonight with Compassionate SA. We know that so many of you are here because of that collaboration, and we'd like for Ann Helmke to share a few words about Compassionate SA. Ann, welcome.
Thanks, Beverly. It is so good to be with all of you this evening. It's such an honor to be a part of this important work. I was asked to talk a little bit about Compassionate San Antonio. It really has kind of two parts, but it's hard to tell where one starts and the other ends because it all works together. So Compassionate San Antonio began at the Peace Center in San Antonio a good decade ago now, but it intentionally grew and nurtured the idea of the city becoming an official compassionate city in partnership with the International Charter for Compassion. And so on the first day that Mayor Ron Nirenberg went to work in 2017, the first resolution that he signed was that San Antonio was to become a compassionate city. At that time, there were approximately 100 cities globally that had made similar statements and resolutions, and today there are 450 of them. So it's a growing movement, but also very intentional efforts. What that resolution says, and it really speaks to what's happening tonight, is that it states that San Antonians are already compassionate. It wasn't a statement of, we need to become compassionate, but that we already are. And in fact, neuroscience tells us that it's a part of our DNA. The resolution also encourages and invites that we learn more about compassion and study the practices, that we grow stronger in our compassion. If we had time, I would love to go over the last 5 years and where we have seen growth, but I would say the strongest growth is in collaboration. And the resolution speaks to that as well. It has a couple action steps. They sound pretty simple when you hear them, but when you think that we're the 7th largest city in the country, they're a little bit larger in process. So the first one, and this is the one that you're a part of strongly tonight, is an encouragement to all the educational institutions in San Antonio to teach the skills of compassion and the practices. Compassion towards self, compassion towards others, and compassion within systems. Also in that resolution, it includes about collaborations across government entities, the faith community, community groups, nonprofits, businesses, everyone working together and care for the most vulnerable in our city. To celebrate when we are, recognize that, and also to join with the other cities around the world. So tonight, what is happening is a compassionate effort towards understanding and awareness of others. And tonight it's going to be on customs and rituals, is one of the first steps towards compassion. So that in understanding someone else's custom or ritual in the way that we wish that ours would be understood and respected, and likewise not to disrespect those customs and rituals in ways we wouldn't want ours disrespected either. That really is the basis of Compassionate San Antonio. And we translate that ethic of reciprocity in as many possible ways as we can. And so tonight, we're learning one of those life-passing compassionate skills of understanding and honoring the beautiful customs and traditions that are present, and many more, in San Antonio. thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here. And thanks for being ABODE. We need lots more ABODEs.
Amen. Thank you so much, Anne. So we're ready to get started. We're delighted to have Rabbi Samuel Stahl with us this evening. And he's well known by so many here in San Antonio. For 26 years, Rabbi Stahl served as the Temple Bethel's senior rabbi. Before that, he was a chaplain in the U.S. Army and the rabbi of Temple B'nai Israel in Galveston. He earned a doctorate in medieval Bible commentaries, along with 2 honorary doctorates, including one from the Oblate School of Theology. Rabbi Stahl is deeply committed in enhancing interfaith relations. He is the author of Making the Timeless Timely, Thoughts and Reflections of a Contemporary Reform Rabbi and Boundaries, Not Barriers, some uniquely Jewish perspectives on life. So before we begin with the rabbi, I want to let you know that we're going to ask questions by using our chat box tonight. So as Rabbi Stahl is speaking, if you have a question or want to make a comment, just write it in the chat box, and Mary and I will go through those as he's talking, and we'll bring those up at the end of his talk. All right. So be sure you're muted, and we'll get ready to take it away. Rabbi Stahl, are you ready?
I am ready. And thank you so much, Beverly and Mary and Anne, for this honor. I commend the people of ABODE and the people at Compassionate San Antonio for your imagination, for your drive, for your creativity, for your organizational prowess in putting this very important program together. About the rituals and the customs of different religious traditions. My topic tonight will be death, dying, and beyond, some Jewish views. Note I say Jewish views, not a Jewish view, because we Jews are highly individualistic. We don't all agree on everything, as many other groups don't. I represent the Reform tradition in Judaism. There are several denominations, but the 3 most popular and the 3 most famous are the Reform, the Conservative, and the Orthodox. The Orthodox are the most traditional. They adhere strictly to Jewish law as binding and as mandatory. The group next to that, which is also traditional, which also believes in the binding nature of Jewish law, is the Conservative, but they make certain modifications. For example, in the Orthodox synagogues, if you attend there for worship, you'll find men and women separated. And there's a divider called a mechitza that divides men and women in worship. Whereas in the conservative synagogues, there's mixed seating where men and women are seated in the same area. I represent the Reform, which is the most liberal of the denominations. And we believe that Jewish law forms a source of guidance. It's not a mandatory set of regulations, but we consult Jewish law to make our religious lives more meaningful and more enriching. And Rabbi Solomon B. Freehoff is one of our leading Reform rabbis and decisors of Jewish practice in our tradition, in our denomination rather. He put it this way. He says, Jewish law is our guide, but not our governess. So with that in mind, I want to emphasize once again that we Jews are not all the same. We defy all stereotypes. We have secular Jews and we have religious Jews. Among our ranks are those who pray daily, those who pray weekly, those who pray only on the high holy days, and those who don't pray at all. Some Jews observe the dietary laws and all of their particulars and minutiae. Others observe only part of them. And some Jews freely eat crab cakes and pork chops. Some Jews have a deep faith in God, while others claim to be agnostics or atheists. Some Jews are knowledgeable about Judaism, and others know little or nothing about it. Yes, there are differences in the Jewish population. especially the American Jewish population. Yet, when all is said and done, there are certain values which Jews of all persuasions and all beliefs tend to accept. I think that all Jews would agree that we as a people are passionately in love with life. When we offer a toast, we enthusiastically proclaim l'chaim, to life. To us, life is a precious gift. Life is valuable and sacred. We are not a religion that glorifies death. We do not extol martyrs. Life is so treasured that you will never find a suicide bomber among our ranks. We Jews cling tenaciously to life as long as we can. Therefore, Jewish tradition insists that we should not hasten or accelerate the death of a terminally ill patient. We cannot deliberately cut that life short. Jewish authorities forbid, for example, injecting a dangerous substance, a lethal substance, to accelerate the onset of death. However, on the other hand, we are not obligated to delay death when death is inevitable. We are not required to use any heroic or extraordinary means to keep a patient artificially alive. Under these circumstances, we are free to remove life support and then let nature take its course. It's often difficult to visit a patient who is terminally ill. We feel awkward. We fear that we will say the wrong thing, and we don't know how to offer the most effective kind of support. In this situation, it's important to let the patient set the agenda and not impose our own views or perspectives. If the patient seems open to it, we may encourage them to review their lives. We need to create a safe place, a safe climate for them to express regrets about failed relationships and unrealized dreams. But at this point, we also need to focus on the ways that they have made a difference during their earthly journey. It doesn't have to be anything so heroic or dramatic. It could be a simple act of kindness. It could be a tiny contribution to making this fractured world a more compassionate and fairer place. These dying patients need the assurance that their being on earth for a brief time will have some meaning and significance that will transcend their deaths. They want to be assured that their lives have not been lived in vain. At the moment that death approaches, there are Jewish prayers and supplications that can be offered. When I was a rabbinical student, I enrolled in a course called Pastoral Psychiatry, which was sponsored by the New York Board of Rabbis in Manhattan. And it was based at Bellevue Hospital in New York. And one Sunday afternoon, I got a call to respond to an emergency that had occurred. A nurse from the emergency room frantically summoned me to the bedside of the hospital of a patient who was dying, a Jewish patient. Obviously, she was a Roman Catholic because the way she phrased her request was that she wanted me to administer last rites to this dying Jewish patient. And I told her that I would be there shortly. However, I assured her that there was no urgency for my offering special prayers before the patient dies. The prayers we offer at the bedside of the dying patient are to give spiritual sustenance and healing to that individual. There are no negative consequences to the dying patient if these prayers are not offered. They are not considered sacraments in our tradition. They are not the counterpart to the last rites or extreme unction in the Roman Catholic tradition. If a patient is conscious, we ask him or her to recite a confessional prayer called a vidui. The patient in this situation seeks atonement for past sins and transgressions, and then concludes with a watchword of Jewish faith, Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, a verse found in the book of Deuteronomy. If the patient is not conscious, someone standing by his or her bedside can offer that prayer on his or her behalf. To these statutory words, I often add this contemporary prayer based on the words of the late Rabbi Alvin S. Roth of blessed memory. Almighty God, we stand before you at the bedside of our loved one, whom you are calling to her eternal rest. We thank you for the many years of life you have granted to her, for the goodness that she has done, and for the love that she has known. If it is your will to take her from this earth, we pray that you will spare her more suffering and pain. We thank you, O God, for the members of the healing team who have cared for her. Bless them for their nobility of spirit, which has called them to your service. And grant that her family may find comfort and solace in you, O God, now and in the difficult days ahead. And when her soul departs, may it enter eternity in peace. Amen. When death comes, we Jews are urged to confront it directly and not deny its bitter reality. The Jewish approach today seems countercultural. Many Americans today tend to avoid dealing with death. They banish it from their consciousness. Death in America is often a taboo subject. Often people say that they don't want a memorial service or a funeral after they die. Immediately after death, the survivors return to their businesses and professions. They don't permit death to disrupt the normal flow of their daily living. We in the Jewish community, by contrast, are obligated to face death in all of its harsh and cruel reality, head on. There's no escaping it. And I have a gripe. I do not like the expression celebration of life to describe a memorial service that's often held after the death of a loved one. Death is not something to celebrate. It would be more appropriate to call it an honoring of life, not a celebration of life. Celebration of life tends to deny the bitter feelings, the anger, the hurt that we're experiencing. And those who adhere strictly to traditional Jewish law try to bury their dead loved ones within 24 hours if possible. If the Sabbath or a major Jewish festival intervenes, burial can be postponed until that holy day is concluded. Members of a burial society known as the Chevra Kadisha, meaning a holy society, a holy group, prepare the deceased for burial. They wash it tenderly with prayers, and then they dress it in a shroud called a tachrichin. Then they place the body in a plain, unadorned wooden casket made without any nails or metal. The casket is often a simple pine box. It's used to emphasize that all people, mighty or lowly, rich or poor, famous or not well known, are equal in death. As a modern Jewish prayer book eloquently tells us, the grave levels all distinction. Neither embalming nor cremation are permitted in traditional Jewish law. Nothing can be done to delay or accelerate the natural disintegration of the corpse into dust. If the body cannot be interred quickly, there's a way for it to be placed in a refrigerated unit so as to avoid embalming. At the cemetery, the casket is lowered into the grave in the presence of all people who are assembled there. Then everybody's invited to throw 3 shovelfuls of earth on the casket. And this dramatic act of burial, though jarring and unsettling, emphasizes the finality of death. Since Reform Judaism, as I mentioned earlier, considers Jewish law to be advisory rather than mandatory, Reform Jews tend to relax some of these laws. Some do authorize the mortuary personnel rather than a Jewish burial society to prepare the corpse. They also permit the use of metal coffins and allow embalming and cremation. However, in recent years, more and more Reform Jews are choosing to adhere to the more traditional practices. Once a funeral is over, mourners are urged not to resume their usual daily activities. Rather, they must deal with the intensity of the loss that they have suffered. Jewish tradition prescribes that they vent their grief according to a carefully designed timetable. During the 7 days following the burial, mourners stay at home. This period is called shiva, which is the number 7. Some mourners observe this period only for 3 days under certain conditions. And in their sorrow, the bereaved have the tendency to withdraw and to isolate themselves from other people. Judaism urges us to do the very opposite and to find solace in the embrace of the community. They are to receive visitors who will bring them comfort and solace. And community members are to provide all their meals and to provide worship opportunities for the mourners during that week. Actually, mourners are to be guests of their own home, and the members of the community become their hosts. Mourners leave the house only to attend religious services on Sabbaths and holidays when these sacred occasions occur. Then for the first 30 days, known as Shaloshim, one avoids celebrations or any forms of entertainment so that grieving can proceed without any distractions or interruptions. And in the case of the death of parents, that mourning period extends from 30 days to an entire year. And during that first year, after the death of a loved one, mourners are obligated to recite the Kaddish. The Kaddish is a prayer for the bereaved. Kaddish comes from a root which means holy. The Kaddish is actually a doxology, a hymn of praise to God, an affirmation of life. Oddly enough, the Kaddish, though a mourner's prayer, contains no reference whatsoever to death. It may be of interest to those of you on this call who are Christian, because the Kaddish is written largely in the language called Aramaic, which was the tongue that Jesus spoke. And its theme is similar to that of the Lord's Prayer. Both the Kaddish and the Lord's Prayer highlight the notion that we take comfort in the idea that God's kingdom will someday come and bring about the good life that we all yearn to achieve. However, throughout this regimen spanning an entire year, the mourners are able to move from grappling with excruciating pain to resuming life with all of its rich possibilities. Once the year of mourning is over, these rituals ideally help survivors to accept death with calm resignation about their loss, with a firm resolve to go on living in spite of their loss. In the case of a tragic death, of course, life really never returns to normal, but the survivor hopefully acquires new coping skills in an effort to move forward. And that movement forward doesn't move in a linear position. Often we go one step forward and take 2 steps backward, etc. This brilliantly designed timetable of mourning for 7 days, then 30 days, and then an entire year helps mourners at this emotionally disorganized time, this chaotic period in their shattered lives, to gain some stability. Those who are grief-stricken desperately need structure and discipline, and Jewish mourning practices impose order on their confusion. Many psychiatrists have discovered that the Jewish mourning schedule is remarkably congruent with sound grief therapy. One of my rabbinical colleagues once told me about a young physician in his congregation who woke up one morning with a profound depression. His wife had died 6 weeks earlier after a lengthy illness. And during the time that she was dying, he and she discussed death very openly. And being modern-minded in their view, they said they didn't want any kind of memorial tribute after they died. No funeral, no service, nothing. As soon as she died, she was cremated, and the physician went to his office the same day. Weeks later, he was not able to live with himself because he hadn't worked through his grief. What resulted was an overwhelming sense of despair and despondency. Physicians can sometimes trace cancer and other medical maladies to a traumatic death of a loved one, which was not fully confronted and resolved. Jewish mourning practices can enable one to face and ultimately accept death directly and realistically. No human being is immune to death. Like birth, death is a natural condition. Death will happen to every one of us. Death is inescapable. No one can keep the angel of death, as we call it, the Malach HaMavet, at bay forever. And when death does come, one must grieve. To inhibit or suppress grief is deleterious to our health. Maintaining a stiff upper lip through this experience can be deadly. Unfortunately, many men in our society have been indoctrinated with the idea that to express feelings is to show weakness. When death strikes a loved one, they bottle up their hurt. Weeping and even wailing are far more beneficial responses. Grief demands a catharsis for men and for women alike. But even though death will ultimately come to all of us, is death the end? Is there nothing to look forward to after we have drawn our final breath? Often a dying Jewish patient and their loved ones, even if they are not observant, may want to know what happens to them after they die. There's a widespread notion, a falsehood, that Jews do not embrace an afterlife, that life ends at the moment when our heart stops beating or our brain ceases its activity. Sometimes we become jealous of some of our Christian friends who speak about going to a better place after they die. These Christian friends are confident that they will reunite with all their loved ones who preceded them in death once again. We Jews attend Christian funerals and hear ministers rehearse the glories that await the deceased in the hereafter. At those times, we Jews sometimes feel like outsiders. We yearn for some reassurance that our life is not really over, that it continues in a state after death. Unfortunately, we have labored under this impression that Jews do not believe in an afterlife, that life is over once we are interred in a grave. As a result, we feel bereft of hope. Our minds rebel against the thought that our little day on earth is all that there is. Now, let me set the record straight. We have been seduced by an age-old misconception. Contrary to popular impressions, Judaism does provide opportunities for a belief in life after we leave this earth. We hold at least 4 possible ideas of what will happen to us after we die. I'm going to name them in order that I discussed them. 1, resurrection. 2, immortality of the soul. 3, reincarnation. And 4, living on through memory and influence. Orthodox Judaism to this day teaches the resurrection of the dead. It's a cardinal doctrine in Orthodox Judaism. It will happen at the end of time. The Messiah will arrive, and peace and justice will finally prevail. Then the body and the soul of the corpse will be reunited and will arise from the ground. 3 times a day in their prayers, observant traditional Jews praise God in the words, Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim, we thank you, O God, for bringing the dead back to life. Those of us who have visited Jerusalem have seen the large Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives. It is opposite the place where the first 2 temples stood in Jerusalem, and where it is believed that a 3rd temple will be rebuilt at some distant future time. Pious Jews throughout the ages have yearned to be buried in that cemetery. They want to be the first to arise from their graves with the arrival of the Messiah. Resurrection figures prominently in the world of Orthodox Judaism. Orthodoxy forbids cremation, we think, because doing so represents a rejection, a denial of the resurrection. Embalming is also taboo. nothing can be done, as I mentioned, to hasten or retard the natural decay of the body. For the soul to leave the body gently and naturally, the body must slowly disintegrate into the earth. Burning the body with cremation shocks and disturbs the soul, according to this traditional belief. Orthodoxy strongly discourages autopsies, except under carefully defined conditions, because dissecting a body may negatively affect the way the body will return to earth in the future. Generally, non-Orthodox Jews have abandoned this age-old belief in resurrection, though they retain some of the traditional language about resurrection in their prayer books. One of my professors at the Hebrew Union College, America's Seminary of Reformed Judaism, once jokingly explained why we Reformed Jews have rejected resurrection. And he said, we don't want to have to face the criticisms and the disapproval of our Orthodox forebears. Because some Jews do not embrace resurrection does not mean that there are no other concepts of the afterlife that we do accept. One of these alternatives is called the immortality of the soul. In this view, our bodies die, and they return to the dust. Yet our soul, that deathless part of God within us, never goes out of existence. Because it is divine in nature, it lives on forever. When a person dies, his or her soul goes back to God, who is the soul of all souls. God granted that soul to us when we are born, and God will take it from us when we die. But our soul itself is imperishable. There's a third view, a little known view, reincarnation. It may surprise many of us to learn that some Jews do believe in reincarnation. The notion that the deceased soul will eventually return to earth to occupy another body or a series of bodies. This idea is popular among those Jews who immerse themselves in the study of the Kabbalah. Franz Kafka, the noted Czech Jewish writer, found healing in such a belief of reincarnation when he lost his beloved sister at the age of 16. He kept asking himself how God could rob the world of such a sweet and gentle young woman. Kafka was unable to cope with his overwhelming grief. He was inconsolable. And one day, Kafka wandered into a small synagogue in Prague. And there he encountered a group of rabbis who were discussing the Kabbalah. And they were exploring in the Kabbalah their views of life after death. Kafka listened intently to what they were describing about the next world. And they explained that there are 10 spheres. At the center are God and the souls of all righteous people. Then in each progressively larger spheres going out are lesser and lesser evolved souls. So when a person is about to be born, God sends a soul from one of these spheres to join a body for a designated period of time. At the end of that time, God recalls it. If that soul has influenced that body toward goodness, it will be promoted from the 10th sphere to the 9th sphere, from the 9th to the 8th, the 7th, the 8th to the 7th, etc. Then it will return to God. And after a brief respite, it will be sent down to earth again to occupy another body. The goal of each soul is to progress from the 10th sphere to the very center sphere, and then the soul no longer has to return to earth. It has at last found eternal peace. These mystics in that Prague synagogue added the following observation. When we meet people who are cruel or selfish, we should not criticize them too harshly. Perhaps they were not lucky. Perhaps they received a soul from the 10th sphere or the 9th sphere. Conversely, when we meet people who are overly generous and kind and compassionate, we shouldn't praise them too much. Perhaps they were fortunate. They might have acquired a soul from the 3rd sphere, the 2nd sphere, which had already been down to earth several times and occupied many other bodies. And then these mystics in the Prague synagogue commented that when a young child dies, we shouldn't cry too much. In all likelihood, that child's soul needed to come to earth for just a very brief period of time to be purified so that it could join God in paradise. Kafka then wrote, I walked out of that synagogue, and for the very first time, I had peace of mind. Now I knew where my sister was. There's a fourth view of life after death. It's popular with most non-Orthodox Jews today. We maintain that our beloved dead continue to exist primarily in the hearts and minds of those who are still alive. In other words, the departed live on through their survivors who remember them and pledge to perpetuate their legacy. In a bar mitzvah in my congregation some years ago, family members told me during the morning that they could feel the presence of the young bar mitzvah boy's grandfather who had died many years before. This was evidence of his ongoing presence in their lives long after his demise. A modern Jewish prayer book states this idea most exquisitely when it says, by love are they remembered, and in memory do they live. When we and our children fondly recall our loved ones whose earthly life has ended, when we adopt their highest values and ideals and transmit them to coming generations, we grant these loved ones their immortality. As we ponder these ideas about the afterlife, we need to explore what Jews have believed about heaven and hell. There is a story about two churches across the street from one another. One was a liberal church and the other was a fundamentalist church. And they were in constant theological warfare with each other. Every Monday morning, the liberal church would post the minister's sermon topic for the following Sunday on the sideboard in front of the church. The minister of the fundamentalist church would wait for that announcement before posting his own sermon topic on his signboard in front of his church. One Monday, the sermon topic on the signboard of the liberal church read, "There ain't no hell." And then about 10 minutes later, a signboard appeared with the title of the minister's sermon for the following week, "The Hell There Ain't." As Jews, our view of heaven and hell would be more aligned with that of the liberal church, which questions our existence. The Hebrew Bible, which some Christians call the Old Testament, surprisingly never mentions a place like hell, where souls are punished after they die. In the Hebrew Bible, when a person dies, whether that person is good or evil, he or she goes to a place called Sheol, or the netherworld. The netherworld is merely a repository of corpses. Nothing happens there. There's no suffering, there's no joy, there's no pain, there's nothing. It's just a spot for dead bodies to be gathered. The reason that the Bible doesn't talk about hell is that, for the most part, it has no view of life after death. The biblical writers believe that before people die, good people will get their reward and wicked people will receive their punishment. But later, we discovered that the world doesn't quite work that neat way. Many good people suffer and many wicked people prosper before they die. Rabbi Harold Kushner explains and explores this thorny issue in his famous work, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. It was the rabbinic sages, and it was, by the way, the rabbis who shaped and developed Judaism as we know it today. Only 5% of what we practice and believe in Judaism today is found in the Bible. 95% is post-biblical. For example, there's no mention of a bar mitzvah that I referred to earlier in the Bible. That's a rabbinic idea, that a boy at 13 in one day becomes of age religiously. These rabbis, as I say, lived long after the Bible was canonized, and they wanted to justify the biblical idea that good people are rewarded and wicked people are punished. They did so by saying that good people who endure suffering in this world will be blessed for certain after they die. And conversely, wicked people who seem so successful and prosperous in this life will surely be afflicted and punished after they die. These rabbinic sages believed that evildoers would go to a place called Gehinnom. Yiddish-speaking Jews refer to it as Gehenna. It's the equivalent of hell. And with vivid imagination and creativity, these sages graphically depict Gehinnom in gruesome and frightening detail. To them, it's a mammoth prison where the wicked will remain until eternity. Gehinnom resembles a fiery furnace. Its fire is 60 times hotter than any earthly fire. It never goes out. And even though these flames fill Gehinnom, it is always pitch dark in that abode. What about heaven? The rabbinic sages describe heaven as a bucolic place. Everywhere there are streams of milk and honey, trees with rich fruits, and mountains blanketed with roses and lilies. Those who are blessed to inhabit heaven are free of jealousy and competition. They know no fears or anxieties. It's truly a stress-free environment. In addition, some rabbinic sages, to whom the study of the Torah is the highest priority, view heaven as a gigantic celestial study hall. They refer to it as a yeshiva shalmala, an academy on high, a celestial study place. In this heavenly setting, God becomes the master teacher of Torah. Those who are wise and pious during their time on earth are enabled to continue their studies of the Torah long after their death. Even today, when a great Jewish scholar dies, we often say that that person has been summoned to the academy on high. Yet we really don't take these notions of heaven and hell seriously, only figuratively. We realize that they were part of the fanciful and extravagant imagination of the ancient rabbinic sages. They developed them primarily to encourage righteous people to pursue a life of Torah and to warn the wrongdoer to stay faithful to its teachings and its regulations. Furthermore, I think it's safe to say that many Jews today will view heaven and hell as earthly phenomena, as earthly states, while we are alive. Hell is an arena of depravity, violence, and corruption and callousness here on earth. Heaven, by contrast, is an ideal situation on earth where only love, compassion, kindness, and goodness prevail. We can think of heaven and hell also as states of mind. Hell can be the pangs of guilt we feel when we have done something immoral or unethical. Hell is a guilty conscience that tortures us for our wrongdoing. On the other hand, heaven is that warm, glowing feeling of gratitude and satisfaction that courses through us after we have done something right. And we don't expect any tangible compensation or rewards for doing good. Doing good confers its own internal benefits. In fact, our sages say it as follows: Sachar mitzvah, mitzvah, that the reward of doing what is right is its own reward. Henry Wordsworth Longfellow, though not Jewish, sums up the modern Jewish view of heaven and hell poetically when he says the following: each man has a paradise around him until he sins, and then the angel of an accusing conscience drives him from his paradise, from his Eden. To sum up, we Jews over the centuries have adopted one of at least 4 different ways of thinking about life after death: resurrection, immortality of the soul, reincarnation, and living on through memory and influence. We even have concepts of heaven and hell, both ancient and modern. Yet by and large, we Jews are not preoccupied with life after death. With all of these reflections I have offered about life after death, I need to emphasize that Judaism is essentially a this-worldly rather than an otherworldly religion. Even though there is life beyond the grave, we maintain that the most important phase of our existence is the interval between our physical birth and our physical death. As we approach death, We generally don't say that we are contented because we are about to go to a better place. If we focus too much on life after death, we will neglect many of the essential challenges that we need to face here on earth. We see this happening with some religious groups. They're oblivious, for example, to the abuses of the environment. They say, what's the difference what happens to the environment? This world's going to end very soon anyway, and we are confident that we will know bliss and ecstasy after we die. For Jews, this is dangerous and irresponsible thinking. It represents a reckless abandonment of our central mission, which is tikkun olam, the repair of a broken and fractured world, which we are to rid of its cruelty and its injustice and its bloodshed. Even though we Jews may believe in some version of life after death, we still say that what happens after we die is not that important. We emphasize that the crucial phase of our existence is our time that we spend here on this earth. When we visit a cemetery, we often note on many tombstones the dash between the date of birth and the date of death. That dash is the most critical part of that designation. It represents the span of our earthly years when we are urged to grow our souls, to become the best men and women that God intended us to become. Some time ago, Linda Ellis wrote a poem which she titled The Dash, and in it, she underscored the significance of the manner in which we are to spend our brief earthly journey. And here are Linda Ellis's words. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of death and spoke the following date of death. First came the date of birth, and then he spoke the following date of death with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years, for that dash represents all the time that they spent here on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little dash is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters most is the time that we have to love and how we spend our dash. Thank you for your attention. Be glad to take any comments or questions. I had a little bit more to say, but I see that we will only have 7 minutes to go.
Oh, that was wonderful. That was a lot of information. My goodness, I learned a lot. Thank you.
My
So we
pleasure.
do have some comments. Let's see. I'll start from the bottom and work up. Are there, a lot of time in Christianity, we talk about reunions with loved ones and seeing loved ones again. Is there any form of that in your beliefs?
I assume that there are, but I've never seen that in the description of the hereafter in Judaism. I'm not saying that there aren't. I just haven't encountered them.
You haven't encountered them. Okay. So in the Jewish faith, do you use all funeral homes, or are there just certain ones that are able to?
Well, technically, we can use any one that we want, but because the burial society comes in and prepares the body there. But in this community, over the years, there was years ago, there was a time when Roy Akers took care of the deceased among the Orthodox and conservative Jews, and Porter Loring took care of the Reformed Jews. But today, Porter Loring does essentially all the Jewish funerals in San Antonio.
And
they're well prepared for it because there's certain, for example, they have skull caps, they have yarmulkes to distribute to people. They know the procedures. They're familiar with the unique ways of Jewish death. And so we tend to go to the funeral homes which know our customs.
Right. And typically they can accommodate you within those 24 hours.
Yes, a very few Jews today bury within 24 hours, by the way, even among the more traditional. For example, a person dies today, this is Thursday. Usually the funeral will be taking place on Sunday, not tomorrow. Now, the very, very Orthodox will bury within 24 hours, but most Jews, even among the Orthodox, some Orthodox, wait for a weekend to pass.
What about the pine caskets? Where do those come from?
I don't. I guess I don't know where the manufacturer is, but the important thing is that they can't contain any metal or any nails or anything like that. They're wooden pegs that hold it together. And often you find that the casket has holes drilled into the bottom so that the body can be turned directly into the earth more easily. It can dissolve into dust more easily. And in Israel, by the way, except in the case of military deaths, the body is placed in the ground without a coffin.
Wow.
They're wrapped in a shroud, the body's wrapped in a shroud, laid in the earth, and then the body is covered with earth.
Progress.
Wow, that's interesting. The folks that come to bathe and take care of the body, are those dispatched by the synagogue? And does the funeral home request them, or
the family requests them? They're really a secret society. One's not supposed to know who. It's supposed to be a very important mitzvah, as we call it, an important kind act, because the dead cannot repay you. That's also similar to why burying the dead in front of the people who are assembled is considered a kind act, because that corpse can't repay you for causing that person to lie in the dust.
But Reform do not have their bodies washed.
If they elect to, they can, but many do not. Many do not.
And why no metal in the coffins?
Because that would retard the return of the body to the dust. That would retard it. It seals the body into the casket more securely. Where wood disintegrates easily, metal does not.
are there ever open caskets for viewing?
At one time there were, but that's strongly discouraged, and you rarely see it today. I have for the last 25 years, I haven't seen that practice in Jewish funerals.
Wow.
We believe in remembering a person while that person's alive,
Yeah.
and not to see a made up corpse.
Are there certain clothing that people are buried in?
Well, traditionally it's a shroud, and the shroud has no pockets because we take nothing with us after we die. It's a shroud. Now, some Jews elect to be buried in a suit or dress, but traditionally the shroud is the garment that's used.
And during this period of mourning, you said that there's the 7 days of mourning. People receive visitors, they don't work. Do they wear armbands to signify that they're in mourning?
Well, not armbands, but there's a custom that I didn't mention, that they're supposed to tear an article of clothing, which can't be sewn up again. And only among the Orthodox is that practice, where a man will wear a necktie and have the necktie cut. He's supposed to wear it all week, or have a lapel of his suit cut. But more liberal Jews will have a ribbon placed, in the case of parents, over their left side, over their heart. And for other relatives, there are 7 relatives for whom mourning is required. A husband or wife, brother or sister, father or mother, son or daughter. I should say spouse. That makes it 7 instead of husband or wife. So those are the 7 that we're required to mourn for. We are free to mourn for others if we want, but we're required to mourn for those 7.
And so the torn ribbon is worn for
the week of Shiva only, the 7 days, but not beyond that.
And they still cover the mirror, correct?
Very
Do they
few
still
people
cover
do.
the mirror?
Very few
Very
people.
few.
can put it in. Yeah. I haven't seen it in very many homes. Chairman, the mirrors, and also they sit on low, in the more traditional homes, they sit on low stools, and they're not supposed to get up to greet people.
Right.
And when you go to the home of mourning, you don't ring the doorbell. You walk in, because if you ring the doorbell, then you're expecting the mourner to host you. So the mourner stays in a low position, seated low to the ground, and people are supposed to come over to the mourner and express their condolences and talk about the loved one. Unfortunately, in some cases, some of these houses of mourning become party scenes, when people are uncomfortable talking about death. So it becomes like a social celebration, but it's not intended to be that. They're supposed to focus on the life and the legacy of the person who has died.
And and that's so common in our society, is when we talk to someone who's in mourning, or you talk to a friend who just lost their parent. It's hard, and so we kind of avoid that subject.
Yes.
And it'd be wonderful to say, tell me about your mom, and what was she like, and what did you love about her? And we think we're inducing pain, but I'm sure that's very cathartic.
It's very cathartic. It's very necessary.
Yeah. Well, gosh, Rabbi, thank you so much.
I have a question, Rabbi Stahl.
May I take a minute to share a book that I highly recommend to all of you? I have the title here. I'll share my screen for a second.
There's a question as well, Sam.
Yeah, okay. Do we have time for it?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the question?
Rabbi Stahl, in hospice, we have a ritual that we bring families back together 1 year, maybe 6 months after their loved one has died. Is this something that we should be mindful of when we are sending out literature or extending an invitation to do and I hate to say the word, but we call it a celebration of life 1 year following the death of a loved one? Do we need to be careful in that activity in hospice?
Oh, on the contrary, we have a tradition in Judaism, which I can only include so much in the time that I had, but we have a tradition called Yartzeit, which means year time. Every year on the anniversary of a person's death, we are supposed to go to synagogue and offer the Kaddish prayer and light a candle, which burns for 24 plus hours. Because we quote the biblical verse, the lamp of God is the soul of something like the soul of a person is the lamp of God. So we light a candle. So we do observe it every year, not just the first year, but every year on the anniversary of the death, we have these particular practices.
And the unveiling, do you want to quickly talk about that?
Yes, and then after the year of mourning, there's an unveiling where we dedicate the monument. And that's often a time for closure because the person is mourned for the year. And that kind of concludes the year of mourning. We call it unveiling. It's really a dedication of the tombstone. I'm going to share with you a book that I highly recommend. If it comes up, I can get up here.
Why don't you just give the name?
Okay, let me just give the name, right. It's called The Beauty of What Remains by Rabbi Steve Leder, Leder. The Beauty of What Remains.
Thank you.
By the way, the person giving me all these very good suggestions is my wife, Lynn, and I welcome her comments. She keeps me,
Thank you, Lynn.
There was,
Thank you.
It always takes a village.
there was another question. Why 3 shovels of dirt?
anytime you ask about a number in Judaism, I can't give you an answer. We don't know. What we do is make up an answer after the fact. the custom started, and then we figure out the reason, and you'll have several interpretations. So anytime there's a number, I don't know why.
It was just a good choice at the time.
Right.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
So you will all receive a survey tomorrow morning in your inboxes, and we'd love to hear from you. Give us some feedback. Even more questions for the rabbi. We'll forward those, and we can get those back to you. But we're always interested in what your thoughts are. If this was what you tuned in to hear, and then next Thursday, tune in again at 6:30. We're going to have Veena Prasad of the University of Texas Long School of Medicine, and she's going to speak to us about death and dying in the Hindu faith. So again, thank you so much, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else did tonight.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
And we will share the link of the recording with everyone, and feel free to share it far and wide.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.